Welcome back to the John Fredericks Show. You have Colonel Mike and Dr. Michael Scheuer. Our next guest coming up is Mike, our next guest.
Dr. E. Kelvin Beisner.
All righty. So he should be on the line. Is he on the line now, Mike?
I am. Thanks very much for having me on the show.
Oh, did you like that lead-in? How were you, Cal?
Right. I mean, a great way to point out the hypocrisy and the extreme bias of the mainstream media. I mean, whatever one thinks of Donald Trump, whether pro or con Donald Trump, the media clearly have a double standard. When Obama uses sarcasm, irony, and exaggeration to press a point home, no problem. When Donald Trump or, frankly, any other Republican does it, it's taken literally, driven into the ground, just like those who would take literally, say something that Jesus says, like if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Obviously.
Well, that's why we wanted you on today. We want to discuss social justice, which is really big in the news today. I mean, it's big in the police. It's big in the black community. Cal, I have your brochure. Dr. Scheuer is going to go speak with you about this, but I want your version of what social justice is according to the Bible. And first of all, you are with the Cornwall Alliance, so you can tell us about your organization first.
Yeah, okay, thanks. The Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation is a network of Christian scholars, about 60 of us, sprinkled around the North America. About a third are natural scientists, a third are economists, and a third are theologians. And we work to promote through educational venues like our website, cornwallalliance.org, and our Facebook page, three things at once. The first is biblical earth stewardship, or what we also call godly dominion, men and women working together to enhance the fruitfulness, the beauty, and the safety of the earth to the glory of God and the benefit of our neighbors. The second is economic development for the poor, and the third is the gospel of Jesus Christ. All of these things tied together because we see that people who are reconciled to God and have their minds transformed by the Word of God to understand better the world that God has made tend to be better stewards of this earth and to produce more wealth and to use it in more just and godly ways that are of benefit to everybody, which really does point us right back to the subject of social justice, because justice is a very important issue in both economics and environmental stewardship.
Okay, Mike?
That's quite an agenda, sir. You have a long road to hoe. I think.
Yes.
This is a subject that has always interested me because I guess I don't understand social justice in the sense that other people seem to understand it. I've always thought that the basic social justice in America was the equality of everybody before the law, and I think I still think that's one of the basic starting points for us, and we've lost so much of that. There's clearly both party establishments are above the law, for example.
Yeah.
But I also don't understand taking money for charitable purposes, supposedly, but simply to even revenues of people across the country. So if you can speak to those issues, I think it'd be very helpful for the audience. I'm not articulating them well.
Yeah. Let me give it a try. The basic concept of justice itself, as I worked through all of the biblical information about justice over a period of, a decade or more studying this issue, I arrived at this definition for justice. Justice means rendering impartially and proportionally to everyone his due in accord with the righteous standards revealed in God's moral law. Now, that partly reveals the very idea that you voiced a moment ago, that justice is making sure that the laws apply equally to everybody. You don't have any favoritism. You don't show partiality. You don't say, well, these people have to obey the laws, but these people don't have to obey the laws, or anything of that sort. All laws must apply equally to everyone and proportionally. For instance, in retributive justice, where we punish wrongdoing, the punishment really needs to fit the crime. This is why you don't have capital punishment for shoplifting. But it also is why you shouldn't have 2-year 2-year prison term followed by probation for capital murder. The punishment needs to fit the crime. Similarly, in taxation, there needs to be equality. Not that everybody pays the same amount, but rather that everybody pays the same proportion. So if you're going to have an income tax, that income tax should be the same percentage for everybody, regardless how much somebody makes. If he makes $1 million and the percentage is 10%, then he pays $100,000. If he makes $50,000 and the percentage is 10%, he pays $5,000. That's justice. Now, the idea of social justice is really simply the idea that we do justice across the entire society. It's not just that you're just and I'm just and we individually treat each other justice. It's that we apply these rules of justice across society. But unfortunately, in the progressive movement of the late 19th century, early 20th century, social justice got redefined to essentially redistributing wealth in order to bring about the result of everybody being at least roughly equal economically. And that can only be achieved by violating the very essence of justice. You cannot have everybody come out at the same point at the end unless you treat people differently along the way, because people are inherently different. We are unique, and thank God for that, or it'd be a pretty boring world.
I think that's a very good point. The only agency that could possibly apply social justice in the progressive era context of that term, or in today's context of that term, would be a government, an authoritarian government, almost
Absolutely.
a fascist government, because it would have to be done at gunpoint.
Absolutely. And, this is why social justice always results in the expansion of government force in people's lives, because anytime you try to equalize the outcome, people are going to find new ways to achieve their own goals, and that means the government is going to have to keep stomping out what people are doing here, there, and everywhere else. It's always going to change. So government will grow continuously, which is exactly what we've seen since the beginning of the progressive era here in the United States.
Cal,
I want
to ask you a question. What is the verse that everybody pulls out of context? Is it Micah 6:8, do good, do justice, something like that?
Yeah, Micah 6:8 says, "He has shown you, O man, what he requires of you. And what does but to do justice, right, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." We as individuals are to do justice and to love mercy and walk humbly with God. But you got to define those terms properly. Justice means I don't do anything wrong to anyone else. I don't harm someone. I don't take his property. I don't harm his person, and so on. But it also means that we exercise retribution where it is called for, punishment for crime, and so on. Mercy means that I extend good benefit to someone who has actually earned the opposite. Now, for me as an individual, I can do that without harming anybody else, because if I, for instance, decline to exact punishment on somebody who's harmed me, I'm not harming anybody else. I'm taking the loss myself. But if I'm a judge in a courtroom and I say, I'm going to be merciful to this murderer and give him just 10 years plus probation instead of a life term or capital punishment, well, I haven't taken the loss on myself. I have forced the family of the victim to take that loss. That is itself injustice. So what we need really is to understand the difference between the individual and the whole society and so on, and we need a biblical understanding of justice, which is what I tried to do in my booklet, Social Justice, How Good Intentions.
Can you give us that website again, Cal? Can you give us that website again?
Yeah, the easiest way to get to it is simply cornwallalliance.org, and then click on the Shop tab and go to Books. You'll find it under that, cornwallalliance.org.
With this booklet, I was thinking, this morning I was telling Dr. Scheuer, this is important to the point people have to understand it. We're using this social justice in a wide spectrum now, because we have all these illegal people coming into the country, and everybody's saying, well, you got to do good, have mercy, after all. And I don't think that's what the verse Micah 6:8 is all about. We're supposed to feed the sheep coming through. When Abraham took care of the sojourner, he didn't say camp out forever and guess what, we're going to give you a welfare check for everybody in your family. He fed the camels or watered the camels and sent them on their way.
Yeah, and that's exactly what is the problem with the whole notion of social justice, is that it's got government taking from some what belongs to them in order to give it to others to whom it doesn't belong, rather than individuals freely choosing to give of their own. The latter is mercy. The latter is compassion. The latter is charity. It is love. It is grace. The former is actually injustice because it violates the eighth commandment, you shall not steal. And that commandment, by the way, does not say you shall not steal unless you are the government. And this, by the way, leads to the important distinction between what we call negative rights and positive rights. Justice requires the enforcement of rights. Now, all of us have a right not to be murdered, not to be stolen from, not to be punched in the nose, etc., right? And that right is a negative right. It's a right against aggression, against harm. And you know what? That right can be enforced without taking away anybody's rights. But there's a contrary idea of positive rights that says, I have a right to a certain amount of food, I have a right to a certain kind of housing, I have a right to a certain amount of education, something like that. And the government exists to enforce justice, which means that it exists to make sure that those rights are provided for. The only problem is the government can only provide those so-called positive rights if it takes things away from others to whom they properly belong. So the very notion of positive rights actually contradicts the biblical understanding of justice itself. There really are no positive rights. There are only negative rights, rights against harm.
Yeah. I think, Doctor, you make just one point that has been on my mind at least for 25 years, and that's I think there is. Let me speak for myself. At least in the Roman Catholic Church, there is a great responsibility for failing to stress the need or to stress the reality that charity and social welfare are the responsibility of the brethren, of the congregation. It's not the government's responsibility.
Yes.
I think in some ways the population of the United States has become numb or ignorant of the idea of their each having a personal responsibility toward their co-citizens. And I think the churches have a big failure there.
Yeah, I think that is true. We can assuage that a little bit by pointing out that, after all, since the government has taken over so much in the way of charitable work, so-called charitable, it's not really charitable when the government does it, but since the government has taken over so much of that, it gives us a way of saying, well, look, I already gave through my tax bill. Now, that's not actually a good and righteous attitude. My attitude should still be, I want to give, and I want to give generously. And we need to look for opportunities to do that in our neighborhoods around us, and certainly through our churches. That's the most important part. The Bible tells us that we are supposed to do good to everyone, especially to those who are the brothers and sisters in the faith. That takes priority. We need to remember that charity is rooted in the word charis, grace. And grace and justice are very distinct from each other. Grace means you give benefit where the opposite has been earned. Justice means you give only what is earned, and precisely what is earned. And I can give grace by losing something of my own, by intentionally giving up a claim of my own to the $10 bill that I hand to somebody on the street corner who's in need. I can't give grace by stealing a $10 bill from somebody else and then handing it to the person in need. That's not grace. That's injustice.
That's I entirely agree. And you know, for people to think that the money you pay in taxes is charity, that money's being taken out of your pocket by force. You really
Absolutely.
are an inert actor in that unless you resist it.
Yeah, and the simple fact that people have been elected to office does not give them the right to violate anybody's rights. We talked about that kind of at the beginning of the show.
Absolutely.
There are an awful lot of lawbreakers in office, and we have actually turned breaking the law into the law here in the United States. This is one reason why I so often recommend a wonderful short book called simply The Law by the French economist Frédéric Bastiat.
Oh, yes, Frederick Bastiat, great writer, yes. Cal, we're coming down to the last 2 minutes. We really appreciate you calling in today. And,
Glad to do it.
And defining what is social justice. Again, it's the Cornwall Alliance. I'm sure our listeners will be looking you up online and looking at some of the great stuff that you guys put out there, and we hope to get you back on the show again soon. I'm sure John's going to want to listen to this. He's on vacation. Cal, I really thank you for your time. Thank you for getting up this early in the morning and sharing this with us. And we hope to speak again soon. Thank you very much, sir.
Good night.
Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you.
God bless.
Good luck to you and your organization, sir.
And you're on the John Fredericks Radio Network.